Dear ones, I have Jude Geiger with me, and you've read a letter that he wrote, and he and I were just talking about it. And can you please talk a little bit, Jude, about your role with Loretta, why you were getting these calls, and what prompted the letter?
Oh, sure. So this letter was, I think, back in May or June of 2021, and I serve on the Loretta board. Loretta is Liberal Religious Educators Association. We're a professional group of religious educators in Unitarian Universalism, although there are some members who aren't UCC in particular. We've got a few folks there. And my role on the board is what's called professional support. So I work with Good Offices, which is a program within our professional group of sort of supporting colleagues during times of crisis or giving advice before things go south. It comes the history of it, as I was taught by the Reverend Ned White, is that Good Offices in UUMA and UUA comes out of sort of the United Nations office. Peacekeepers, like you can use nations in conflict can use the good offices of the
I did not
UUMA.
know that. Huh. Okay.
So come to our good offices and we can help you work through things. But at this time, I was working with a few people that were losing their jobs with no warning. In some cases, uh, days warning. And it wasn't just one or two people, it was quite a few that were happening across the continent. And it gave me a fair bit of anger that my clergy colleagues, I'm a minister also, I'm currently serving the parish in Long Island and Huntington, New York, uh, that we would be in a spot as religious leaders that our staff or our ministry team would surprise that they were losing jobs in June.
Well, it was a solid leader, and or a solid letter. And I think I told you that some people had the response of Jude had a lot of feelings, and it was a very strong letter, and it was a very solid letter and very clear. And some folks had the feeling that that was just good supervision. And how did you learn to be a good supervisor?
Well, before I was in the ministry, I served as a university, First State University, a big one, computer help desk. I was a supervisor for 24/7 IT department where I had 30 part-time staff and 10 full-time staff, and we were supporting 17,000 end users, students, faculty,
Oh
staff.
my goodness.
And so I had to learn how to manage and supervise, or I should say supervise. There was a whole hierarchy in that system that's a little different than ours. The technical term would be supervision, workflow, and feedback. But the things I would recommend in the clergy world, I went to the Institute one year and then afterwards took another 15-hour training with Reverend Susan Beaumont. She's, I believe, Baptist. Is that right, Tandy?
I don't even know.
So
No.
she's a minister with also an MBA, and she does consulting work for churches and for congregations and for clergy. But she has a whole series of workshops. I took one 15-hour training on building staff teams, and I took another one on basic supervision, and that really helped translate what I learned in an educational setting into a nonprofit church setting. And there's similarities. I mean, there's some things that are just good supervision, but there are other things that we sort of forget about, particularly with most of our seminaries, really don't put a big focus on management in our grad programs.
That is true. I didn't get any. I didn't get any in my seminary. Went to a Jesuit, got nothing. Yep.
I didn't either. I had some in my first grad degree. It was public policy, management, community development, and there were some courses on it, but really just the big picture, not the day to day stuff,
Hmm.
conflict resolution and whatnot.
Yep. Yep. I was lucky to have some really good supervisors that kind of taught me by, I want to be like that supervisor if I ever get to be a supervisor someday. One of the questions that people had or noticed the tension between shared ministry and supervision, because there are some models where policy-based governance, where they would even call the minister the CEO or something like that, and makes people cringe. Most letters of agreement will talk about the minister being the chief of staff. And then you have still a spirit of shared ministry. Can you talk about that tension a little bit?
Yeah, it's a real one, especially, well, it depends on, I'm presuming we're talking to seminarians, right,
Yep.
Tandy? So
Yep.
folks that are, whether, regardless of your age or your work experience, you're newer to the ministry,
Yep.
or the clergy side of ministry. Although some of you have had a lot of work experience in churches as educators and doing that sort of ministry or membership, or I imagine maybe someday or already someone in administration. Depending on the dynamics of someone's tenure, they might be, if you come into a new space as a new supervisor, some of them might have been doing the work for 10 or 20 years, might have a story in their head about past supervisors. That's always in the room. There's also a power dynamic in congregations based on size. How does the board interact with the minister? Sometimes clergy will have their own pressures. The board thinks they're the supervisor of the minister. In some places, like where I serve right now, I supervise, but I don't have hiring and firing. I do all my reviews, I do all of that, but the board has the hiring and firing authority. It's a historic fellowship model,
Yeah.
and we figure out, when you're in that setting, you really have to start from the beginning. Pat Ellenwood, a retired now educator, used to say, "Start as you mean to continue." It's really
Mhm.
important in the beginning to figure out how you navigate those dynamics if you're in that setting with the board, so that there's not combat or worries around trust around authority. And that takes a lot of trust building in the beginning. That's more important. The day-to-day stuff that we talk about with shared ministry and supervision, I think when you see a tension, it probably means, or when the system understands attention, might be a better language to use for that. It's important to kind of discern what your idea of supervision is. Is it power over, or is it, I mean, there's a certain amount of power over, but do you see yourself in the role of power over, or do you see yourself as a steward of the ministry resources in your congregation? And it changes how you act.
Mhm.
In my setting, when we're in the middle of transitions because people moved on to other jobs, there were medical leaves, et cetera. But there was a point where we had a half-time communications marketing person, a full-time admin, a full-time lifespan DRE, a half-time music director, a part-time bookkeeper, and then
Oh, God, I can hear
custodial
the
stuff.
weariness in your
What's
voice.
that?
I can hear the weariness in your voice.
It's a lot of job searches. I could do another whole thing on that one day. We've done like 10 of them because between COVID and medical issues, we've had a lot of real tragedy. Thankfully, no one's left because they hated me or the congregation. Yay. um, and in fact, a previous educator and I are going to see a Broadway show tomorrow, so life's good. That said, I think what's important in the setting where I'm in, what I say to the staff team I work with is, yeah, I'm doing the reviews. There'll be no surprises. Here's how we do them. We'll touch base every week in a weekly meeting and as a staff team, and then we can talk whenever. But the power over thing is something that you really need to be careful around. I've watched minister colleagues micromanage, and there's reasons for it. They might not trust the educator yet in that case, or the admin, or there might have been historic problems. So the new person coming in doesn't really realize that there was so much drama before and it's on the minister's head and all of that. But a philosophy I've kind of developed once you have your team going is to be really clear. If someone has a portfolio, say lifespan RE, it's their call. They can talk with me about something if they're making a change. I can give my concerns. We can talk it through. But my philosophy has always been give it a shot. We can test it for 6 months or 3 months and reassess. But as long as, even if I disagree with your choice, as long as I'm not going to burn down the building, it's your portfolio, and run with it. And then we can touch base. Uh, it, I think part of that challenge comes out of the white supremacy that we've been kind of unpacking.
Yep.
Uh, and around perfectionism, like if it's not perfect up front, you failed as a supervisor, or any mistake a staffer makes needs to be addressed. I've had board members say, well, this person did X, Y, and Z, and you really should address it. And I'll say, they've done 99% fine. It's not even a blip. Like, I'm not going to have a meeting over not a blip. And I don't mean like if it's like a mistake that does need to be addressed. You need to address it in a timely manner. But the idea of like other leaders tracking every error is it's not good management. It's not good supervision. It's demoralizing. You can mention in passing. Sometimes if I have to mention it, I'll mention like at the same time a mistake I made around it, so it doesn't feel like an attack.
Yeah.
But you really don't want to come across as in charge unless there's a real reason to be in charge. It's demoralizing. No one likes it.
Yeah. I had a supervisor once. I was in a job that required risk taking. It had strategy and growth in the name. And it required, I was going to do a lot of new things. And my boss said, I expect you to make a bunch of mistakes. If you're not making mistakes, you're not stretching, you're not doing the risk taking that we're hiring you to do. And then asked, how would you like to fix them? What do you need from me in order to fix them in a way that feels good? I
It's a
was
great
like,
way.
oh, that's good right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he had me. I mean, if anybody was fussing about what I was, trying new things, he's like, my job as your supervisor is I'll take those calls. You keep doing what you're doing. I'll take
Right.
those calls. It was a great partnership.
It is the best. I'll keep that one under my hat too. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. So I'm totally shifting gears here. When did I first identify as a religious educator?
Oh, wow. Great question. Hi, everyone. This is Lola. She says hi.
Hey, Lola.
My dog. Hi, Lola. Okay.
Hey, Lola.
Seminary. It's seminary, Lola. All right. The cat might show up too. That's a really good question. I would answer it in different ways. When I was raised Catholic, I left it when I was 16 and found Unitarianism as an 18-year-old right out of high school. But I taught CD for years as a teenager. And then I think the first time I was a paid educator was a junior youth advisor for All Souls in New York City. Uh, I was not yet in seminary. I was in my 20s at that point, and then I did my internship split at Shelter Rock between Parish Paul Johnson, retired now, and Barry Andrews, MRE, retired now also.
Wow.
It was a really phenomenal opportunity, and even Jennifer Brower was with us in the beginning, and then she went on sabbatical, and then I inherited from her the education for our seniors at their senior home, which was phenomenal. So I really had a lifespan education process. It
Wow.
was pretty amazing. And I also did my clinical pastoral education at Columbia Presbyterian Pediatric Children's Hospital, ICU, which was devastating and
Yeah.
powerful
Yeah.
and meaningful. I used to come home on the subway with my eyes wide every day, but I really wanted the training. I was planning on doing family ministry. I didn't know what the job would be, but that was my plan. And then my first hire was as an MRE um, at Brooklyn. Back in those days, I believe, no one's corrected me yet, I was the last person on the RE track when we still had tracks.
Yeah. I
It
pushed,
changes
but you
every
wouldn't let
five
me.
years.
You're like, we
What's that?
don't do tracks. I'm like, I want it on my record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's on my record.
They're like, we know. Go on.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
And I was also, when I worked at the IT department at the university, I was actually a member of the American Federation Teachers Union. So I was the person at the university that would be tapped, new tech would come in. I'd have 3 days to a week to learn it and then teach all of the faculty and staff the new pedagogy, tech pedagogy, whatever. So I was a resource for faculty. I didn't teach students, but I taught faculty so they could better teach students.
God, boy, did I need you in this last couple of you. I know you are like really busy, but wow, there was an opportunity there. I'm going to keep that in my back pocket. Um,
Now I pretend I don't know how to fix the printer.
I know. I know. Um, I want to, so this might be like an hours long question. I don't know. And just tell me if it's too much. Was there anything that you like now that you're out in ministry? Is there, I mean, like after seminary, I'm not saying this very well. What do you wish you would have learned in seminary that just didn't get taught?
That's a great question. A lot of the common answers I wound up actually getting taught with my first degree because it was in nonprofit
Mhm.
work. Technically urban planning, but urban planning is not necessarily urban planning. It's a different creature in public policy. Um, I would have liked to have been taught. I would have loved if some faculty member actually said to us at some point, "You're not going to learn everything you need to learn." So when everything gets wackadoodle, uh, you're not failing by not knowing the answer. I
Yes.
remember my first year in the parish as an MRE, the senior minister was, was Patrick O'Neill, who's long retired now, but one of the great preachers
Yeah.
of this past century.
Yes.
And we would have, every so often, there would be a moment that was absolutely absurd. And he would lean over to me and say, sometimes it would happen on the chancel. He would say, they didn't cover this one in seminary. And this is a 30 plus year minister who everyone at the time knew. So it's going to be okay. Fumble, learn how to say oops, and that non-anxious presence is the most important thing. Um, but yeah, the idea of like 3 years you learned everything. No.
No. One of my kids has a black belt in jujitsu. And so I always thought black belt meant that like you're done. You're like, you know everything. And it's not. It's now you know enough to begin.
Yeah.
And I think of, your seminary degree is kind of like that. Okay, you know enough to begin. Yeah.
It's that's a phenomenal metaphor and or analogy, and like some of the history behind that fits also. And I never thought about this until you just said this. The black belt originally, in some traditions, came about because the white belt you started with was dirty enough now, right? That it was a black belt, and that's not
Oh,
untrue for ministry either, right? Like
no.
all the mistakes, all the mess, all the clumsiness,
Yes.
all the falling down makes you ready to begin as a minister.
Yeah. I think that's one of the reasons I love spiritual direction so much is I get to sit with colleagues as it's like, oh, what did you learn about this? Okay, what did you just learn about yourself through
Yeah,
this? It's not, that we're constantly learning. And the other thing I would tell people is don't do this alone. Don't
yeah,
think that you have to have it all figured out. But like I'm so grateful for the work that you do, Jude, in helping create that collegiality, helping create systems where we can fail forward and we don't have to be alone when we're doing it.
yeah.
That's so good. I'm so appreciative of your ministry, Jude.
And I appreciate the support you've given me these past few months when my whole world was falling apart. It's
Lord.
when I finally realized what colleagues meant. I mean, and I get it in the educator side. The educators have long been a community of survival.
Yep.
And so we understand what colleagues mean. The next wave of clergy coming in now and the last 5 years have a very much more similar feel to what I see in Laredo.
Yep.
Part of it is there's a lot more Laredo people coming up, yay.
Yeah.
Um, but 15 years ago, I would be the new person in the room, and I would be surrounded by a bunch of older cis heterosexual white men who have had been in a competition with each other for the previous 20 years, and so I didn't really get what colleagues meant. And now this year's been really rough in a whole lot of ways. I won't go into it; doesn't matter now. But a lot of colleagues, Tanny's one of them, but a lot of colleagues have been reaching out and being like, you know what, it's okay to fall apart,
Yep.
and that's helped me get through. Uh, I don't know how much that was taught in seminary. Another one in seminary that you made me just think of, how much we change. Myers Briggs is like the super important thing in the beginning with the MFC and all that. But no one really told me that it would change over time, possibly in the ministry. I started out as a ENTJ, the general, the field commander, like get everything done, perfect for an educator. Believe me, perfect. But 5 years into the ministry and those receiving lines, I'm now an INFJ, which is like Yoda, like the complete opposite.
Now I'm
Uh,
going to go take mine. I think I'm more of an introvert now.
it's important. And I mention it because you're not going to understand. You might. I didn't understand about 5 years in why things that used to give me energy were exhausting and things that used to exhaust me were giving me energy.
Yeah.
And I retook the test, and then it's like, oh, I have to reassess how I understand how I'm acting in the world because I'm not acting the same anymore.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. We're constantly learning. We're constantly changing. Our vocation gets to change too, if we want it to.
Yeah,
There's not one path. And we get to do it together. That's a
definitely.
really good thing.
The rules, there's no rules. I mean, I don't know if this is off topic. There are no rules. When I came through the MFC, the RCC, when we had in the MFC, because I was a community organizer before, I was like the only person told I should go into community ministry. Every other community minister was told you should go into parish. Like, it's just follow your calling.
Follow your calling. I will end there. That's a good amen. That's a
Yeah.
good amen right there.